I was looking at one that is getting at the idea of talked about, you know, being 19 and now in your 40s. So assume a couple of decades change. When you look at society generally and try to step back and evaluate the any kind of progress, you know, society maybe focus here in the US has made toward more acceptance of same-sex attraction and less, at least overt homophobia. Do you think that young do you think that, say, teenagers today who find themselves struggling with same-sex attraction have an easier or different road ahead of them, less likely, just the same likely to be maybe confused or questioning, well, does this mean that I was actually meant to be a woman instead of a man, or does
Yeah.
this mean I'm just gay and myself and others just have to deal with that?
Well, you're the attorney, so hopefully you've got this memorized. I was going to try to Google it briefly, but when was Obergefell? Is
That I
that
think was 2015. So it's still
2015?
pretty fresh.
Yeah, it was. I think that was about the peak of it being an open environment for young gay and lesbian people, because there was a lot of social attention on the question of legalizing gay marriage. There were a lot of celebrities that were in support of it. It was something that you saw on TV. There were conservatives and liberals who were both making arguments in favor of legalizing gay marriage or in some cases of civil partnerships. But in any case, there was a lot of social acceptance. Even it might be hard for people to recall, but even as recently as 2008, Barack Obama, when he was campaigning, was against gay marriage, unambiguously against gay marriage, and so was Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
So in the course of about 7 years, there was a huge amount of social change and social acceptance. That was probably the best time as a young person to come out. So
that's arguably a short window, because
it was.
Yeah.
Because the attention turned to the gender identity.
Mm-hmm.
So I had got to spend a fair amount of time recently with Ben Appel, who is a writer in New York and a gay man. And he was relating some of the experiences that he's had in a college setting where, despite the fact that when he was a child, he was gender nonconforming, nevertheless, he is Caucasian and he's male. And currently, the being a gay white male is considered to be, you're male, so you're an oppressor. I know that's simplifying things a little bit, but there are some people who think simply, right? So he might be able to defend himself in an argument against an accusation like that, but he's been in environments where he's had to. And I've heard this from other gay and lesbian women in an academic setting, that if you are what they call cis, which is not trans, that automatically puts you on one side of a duality that's a oppressor-oppressee duality. And what we've seen since 2015 is that more and more men and women who had up to that point described themselves as gay, more and more are men are calling themselves he, they, and women are calling themselves she, they, because it has some sort of protective feature to describe yourself as non-binary, because that makes you not cis anymore. And there's this pressure to trans yourself socially, not necessarily medically, but to have a social identification as trans, merely to change your position on that cis trans scale. And I don't think that this is good for anybody at all, but I think it's particularly bad for gays and lesbians, because throughout all of our history, through the Western history, I feel like I should put some boundaries on that. In our lifetimes, at least in our lifetimes, to be gay was to be gender nonconforming. To be lesbian is to be gender nonconforming. And the idea that you could persuade gays and lesbians to identify themselves with sex stereotypes by insisting that they call themselves cis is a little bit crazy, because that's ahistorical. It's never been the case. Maybe for some individuals it might be different, but by and large, for gays and lesbians have always been gender nonconforming. So this brand new framework that says if you relate to these gender stereotypes, you are therefore an oppressor. Well, how many here, doesn't matter if you're trans or not, how many of here feel like you are models of the gender stereotypes that match your sex? I don't think anybody feels that way. But what we have right now is a dynamic where we talked about incentives at the very beginning of this as we were warming up. All of the incentives right now are to identify on that trans scale, which, because the cost of it is only updating your pronouns, and the benefit of it is that now nobody can call you an oppressor or accuse you of having that sort of positionality where you're assumed to have power over someone else.
Well, yeah, and I mean, we just talked about how the window of time has been so very short that homosexual people in the US have had the full slate of civil liberties and legal rights and so forth, up to and including, marriage. I mean, that's been only a handful of years, really. So it makes a lot of sense that that there was not a lot of time for pressures to shy away from or feel ashamed of homosexuality, to just have completely gone away, dissipated, not be there internally for, a teenager or a young person in college struggling with same-sex attraction, coming to terms with that. There are, as much as I see progress, as someone who came out as lesbian 20 plus years ago, I see a lot of progress. But I also am deeply aware of pockets and certain cultures and areas and families, etc., where it's not a whole lot easier now than it was 20 or 25 years ago to be homosexual. So that said, even though there's no cost in some of the ways that you're describing to socially transing yourself, I think if you are same-sex attracted and trying to go a even just social, not even medical trans route at the same time, I don't know how that can't conflict in the sense, and that it is never costless at that point, because at some point you've got to work through and come to terms with what your own basic sexual orientation is. And if you are female attracted to females or male attracted to males, you're postponing that, it seems to me, if you call yourself, or in a way hide behind, an identity that allows you to not deal with the homosexuality aspect of yourself, at least first, before. It seems like doing these things at least at the same time has got to be very, very confusing and counterproductive for growing up psychologically healthy and integrated with who you are and who you are in the world.
If I were a teenager now and had very similar experiences growing up, I would probably be interested in calling myself he, they. And I would say the same things that a lot of these other young people say, which is, well, I'm not like other guys. Or as the women say, I'm not like other girls. And use that as a way of differentiating myself from the men who I don't relate to.
Yeah, I mean, as a woman who has found the lesbian community in its various outlets over a couple of decades very, very valuable and very special, and I feel like I'm watching it disintegrate these days. What is hard about that is it just seems to be backtracking on, we're kind of at a point of you can be proud to be who you are. I mean, that was pride, right? I mean, whether you're marching and everything all day long every month of the year, set that aside. It's kind of a little overboard in that way, but there was a sense of you are who you are, and you can be proud of that, and you can walk in the world as who you are, holding the hand of the person you love, and we're going to have each other's backs, and we're going to walk this through society until that becomes a lot more okay. And if you back away into a she they, I just see that as, for young lesbians, kind of a backturning on wanting to even be part of a lesbian community anymore, because that's a different community, I guess.
Almost like if you're a gay woman, that somehow means that that cannot be a facet of womanhood. That has to be a facet of something else. The theyness, right? So it's like a concession that you aren't a legitimate participant in your sex if you have that thing that's different about you, and that you have to put yourself in a separate category, which is not right, which is not it's not good to teach people that they should other themselves because they have some attribute that's not typical for their sex.